My talk this morning is entitled, What Am I? In Psalm 8, verses 3 to 5, we read, When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor. When I was like 12, 13, I'm not sure just what year, I had a couple of unusual experiences. I've never talked about them to anybody, but it seemed to be the right time. I was standing in the bathroom, and I was either brushing my teeth or combing my hair and looking at myself while I was doing it in the mirror, when suddenly everything disappeared. Everything went black, except for my eyes staring back at me from the bathroom window. Bathroom mirror, I should say. And at the same time, I heard a voice in my head saying, What am I? What am I? And then everything went back to normal. It was a second or 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Everything changed and went back to normal. There I was, and there were surroundings around me. But a few days later, exactly the same thing happened again. My face and everything else disappeared, and it was just my eyes looking back at me from the mirror, and the voice asking, What am I? What am I? Well, it was kind of strange and different. And I thought, well, that's kind of neat. And I tried to scrunch up my face and make it happen again, pushing somehow. And of course, I didn't make anything happen. I never told my parents about it. It would have been interesting if I had. It would have been interesting what they would have said to me. They were very broad-minded people. I just kept it to myself, though. And I never really forgot about it, but years would go by between the times when it would come to mind again. I would revisit it, and it was just as clear as when it happened. That question didn't seem to penetrate my consciousness very far, because I never asked myself intellectually, well, what am I? I never did that. It's very possible, though, that the pursuit of the answer to that question went on even though I wasn't aware of it. When I picked up Nona Brooks' biography, Nona Brooks was the founder, one of the founders of Divine Science, picked up her biography called Powerful is the Light. I read about a unique experience that Nona Brooks had in her girlhood. I found it very interesting. Powerful is the Light relates this event when, Nona had a little sniffle, and the rest of the family went to church that Sunday morning, but she was left at home because of her sniffle. She wasn't sick enough to be in bed or anything, but she had her Sunday go-to-meeting clothes on, and she wandered down into the garden in this beautiful, sunny Sunday morning. And suddenly, the garden was filled with light. The garden was filled with light, and the light was the light of God. And she was filled with a sense of love and peace and joy. And then, just as quickly as it came about, it stopped. It vanished. She never forgot that brief moment, though. And later on in her life, she became a very ill woman. She became a really sick woman. And she began seriously praying, not to receive healing from God, but she prayed to God for light. God, give me light, she prayed. Well, many of you have read the textbook and the story about how when she and her sister went to the fourth class meeting at Mrs. Bingham's house, Mrs. Bingham had experienced this tremendous healing, and she was sharing with her friends and neighbors what the teacher in Chicago had taught her and how she had become healed. During that fourth meeting, what happened was all of a sudden the room was filled with light. It was brighter than sunlight, and it filled her and it surrounded her. And when it gradually ebbed away, she knew she was healed. She knew that she was no longer in danger of losing her life. Nobody else in the room saw the light. She was the only one. But the presence and the power of God healed her. Now, many people have had such numinous moments, moments where they had a kind of unforgettable quality about them. There was perhaps a sense of peace that filled them, or an indescribable knowingness about something. They were convinced, sure, of a certain thing in their lives. Sometimes it was a sense of oneness, of being one with everything and everyone. That was the kind of experience that Ed Mitchell had when he was coming back from the moon. It changed him entirely, changed the whole trajectory of his life. Feeling that oneness out there in space, coming back to Earth. Sometimes these moments are deeply spiritual, holy moments. Sometimes they're not, just an indescribable peace in them. It was a spiritual moment when Nona Brooks was in the garden as a little girl. Well, certainly my experience didn't have a spiritual quality to it. It didn't seem to. It just seemed to be stating a central, all-important question for me. What am I? Some people describe their experience as an aha experience, just a life-changing realization of something. But everyone is different. Everyone is a little bit different from anybody else's experience because it's tailor-made for them. At times, people have felt this numinous moment, and numinous means spirit-filled or light-filled. This numinous moment, sometimes they've experienced it in nature. Oh, when they're out in their gardens, digging in the earth, or they're taking a walk through the woods. Brother Lawrence had that numinous moment when he saw a tree that was bare of leaves, and he knew that spring would bring forth an abundance of greenery and life again. That was his numinous moment. Some people have seen something, perhaps in a museum, of great beauty, or wondrous dance, or beautiful, beautiful music that touched them and lifted them and somehow inwardly changed them. And as I've said, many people have had these unique, special moments. And they are only moments. They last just the briefest amount of times. Perhaps many of you have. Maybe my talking about that this morning might have jogged your memory about that experience you had some time back. But no matter what brought it on or where you experienced it, I believe that it was a brief connection with that non-physical, eternal, spiritual dimension of you, your own soul. When I had those moments in front of the bathroom mirror, what an auspicious place to have it. It never occurred to me that it might have some future effect on me. That never entered my mind at all. It didn't consciously, but in retrospect, it might have had an unconscious effect on me. Life somehow brought me to divine science, and it was in our spiritual principles that I found an answer to the question, what am I? You see, in divine science, when we define God, we define ourselves. We define what we are. Okay, how do we define God? Well, how many religious philosophies define God as omnipresent, everywhere present, omniscient, all knowing, and omnipotent, all powerful? That's what they say about it. And how many people have heard those words and they were just words, just kind of rattled them off without a real deep sense of what they meant. Divine science is different in that respect because divine science puts a major emphasis on omnipresence and what that really means, because the originator of divine science, Melinda Kramer, experienced God as omnipresence. She experienced God fully. He was present himself and everything he is within her and within everybody. And he manifested as unconditional love, as the force of perfect life, the life force itself, of all wisdom and knowledge, of understanding, and at the same time, power, infinite power, and total joy. That's how he manifested to her in herself. And she, knowing that God being omnipresent, he was present in exactly those dimensions, those infinite dimensions, in everyone and in everything. Now, it occurred to her very swiftly that if God was the life force itself and God filled her and surrounded her, then the 25 years of illness that she had experienced was not the spiritual truth of her at all. And she had been an invalid from doctor to doctor to doctor, all over the country practically, trying to find an answer to her illness. Nothing worked. But she had been sick for 25 years. The truth was not illness. The spiritual truth of her was health. And when she began watching her thinking and replacing every old erroneous thought about illness with the truth that God is the life within her, the spiritual truth of her, she was completely healed within a matter of a couple of months. It was a matter of weeks, practically. She changed from this limited, sickly woman who I believe she had to sit on the steps to get up to her bedroom. She became this dynamo of energy who healed many other people, who founded a school for teachers, practitioners, and ministers of divine science, and not only founded the school, but wrote and systematized all the class lessons. She started an international magazine, and she traveled from coast to coast, speaking to and teaching divine science to very large groups of people. She went from 0 to 60, as I used to say, or 90, whatever. She taught that omnipresence meant exactly that, that God was present in every cell of your body, in every relationship, in every breath you took, in every time on the job, time you walked through the door on Monday morning, in your play, in every activity, in every moment, always. She taught this great principle. He is present in all time and all space. And she fully and resoundingly agreed with Paul when he said, in him we live and move and have our being. She was there in that consciousness, that belief, and taught it to others, and it worked. It worked magnificently. So, Every one of us, not just me, needs to answer the question, what am I? And because of divine science, we can reply what we say on every Sunday morning. I am the individualized expression of God. And individualized, remember, individualized means undivided. Undivided. We and every person, place, and thing in our lives is part of God. God's presence is everywhere. Never separated. We are never divided away from Him, and neither is anything else. That's what omnipresence means. We are one with God. We are one with everything else because we are one with Him. We are one with every created thing. I am the individualized expression of God, and I am ever one with this perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. As God's perfect expression, made in His image, and of that we are assured in Genesis, we can justifiably expect that we are going to have a life that reflects that, that reflects God and all that He is, the good He is, because God and good are synonymous. We can expect to have a life where we experience health and harmony and abundant supply and love and inner peace. And when we really learn what we are, then we begin discarding the barriers that we have created to the full expression of what God wants for us. We discard old fears. We discard any old feelings of guilt. That is not necessary. We are people with a new consciousness, with a new expectation, and with new actions. We discard any sense of unworthiness that we might have, or any sense of we're not as good as other people. We need never envy anybody because we are all equal in God's eyes, and that's what really counts eternally. We don't ever have to get even with anybody who has harmed us because, after all, we are all learning the lesson that we must reap what we have sown. An old lesson that we probably have to keep learning. We can and must integrate greater love for God in our lives. We must integrate a greater love for our fellow humans and most especially for ourselves, for this handiwork of God that we are. This has to embody itself in our thinking and in our actions with everybody at all times. God's most basic core quality is love, unconditional love. And it is our most basic core quality as well because we were made in His image. As we express love, we begin seeing greater good in other people. We begin seeing greater good in our experiences. And we begin finding blessings here and there and there and there. As we sow outstreaming goodwill, which was Nona Brooks' definition of love. As we experience and express outstreaming goodwill to all, we reap more opportunities, more blessings, more beauty, more love from everything and every person. Love is God's wavelength. When we express love, we express and experience beauty and power. We express and experience God's wavelength and our true wavelength. A few weeks ago, Eddie and I were looking at Nova. It's on PBS, and they have some really, really good programs. And this program happened to be about the Hubble Space Telescope. And they showed the most beautiful pictures of various formations in constellations in the Milky Way, and they were just wonderful to behold. And then they began talking about an experiment that they had done with the Hubble. They aimed the telescope at a tiny segment of seemingly empty sky, not toward the Milky Way galaxy, but out into what seemed to be empty space. And they took what is called a long duration exposure picture of this segment of space. It might have been days, it might have been weeks, I don't know how long it was, but it was a lengthy time. And now this picture was a segment of sky that was as big as the period at the end of a sentence if you hold a book out to arm's length. Tiny, 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 little, tiny bit of the sky. But when they developed the film, there were literally hundreds, perhaps thousands or more galaxies in that picture. Little whirling galaxies. They have since estimated that there are 100 billion galaxies in the universe. And in each of those galaxies are 100 billion stars like our sun. And countless planets going around those stars. It boggles the mind. You just cannot stretch your mind to imagine 100 billion galaxies like our Milky Way galaxy. All that creation, unbelievable. Now, an all-powerful divine energy that could create a universe that vast, that complex, that mysterious, that magnificent, created us in his very own image. We cannot begin to fathom the complexity. We cannot stretch our minds to know about the wisdom, the magnificence, the power, and the love that comprise our soul nature, the image of God. Never, ever judge yourself by this little tissue of protein that we walk around with and that we have put on in order to learn the lessons of earth. Never, never limit yourself to just the physical body. That's the least part of you. We are here to learn lessons, and certainly among the most primary is, what am I? You are first and foremost a wondrous spiritual being, crowned with honor and glory. As the psalmist said, you are one with God and always will be. You are forever his eternal, wondrous child. That is what you are.